This is the Peak District in Derbyshire, England. In this episode, we're taking a trip up to Aquae Arnemetiae, better known today as Buxton. It was in this ancient spa town that Geoff Quinn set up a small brewery in 2008. From that moment on, the aptly named Buxton Brewery has been a force to be reckoned with in the British craft beer scene. Welcome to No Pants During the Pandemic. Hi, I'm Kevin Brooks, and this is No Pants During the Pandemic. Today I'm speaking with Geoff Quinn of Buxton Brewery in Buxton, England. Hey Geoff, how you doing, man?
Hi Kevin, yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Let's just jump right into the questions. Why don't you start by telling me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Geoff Quinn, one of the founders and owners of Buxton Brewery here in England. This year we are just turning 12 years and looking forward to 2021 being a better year than 2020 for sure.
How did you get into beer?
Before I started the brewery, which was started in the garage at home, I was working in computers and just observing what was going on in the burgeoning craft beer world at the time, with Brewdog and Thornbridge making some interesting, beer, stuff like I'd never tasted before. In a previous career, I had worked in some larger breweries, doing some work on plant and systems and so forth. So obviously, it goes without saying you have an interest in beer, drinking it, but it was the blossoming craft beer movement that was happening, plus previous experience in manufacturing and engineering, plus the job in computing was becoming a bit stale. Plus I thought, if Buxton doesn't have a brewery soon, it will have, so I might as well be the one that starts it. And that's pretty much how it happened. So me and a friend just got some second-hand 80-litre vessels and just cobbled together a small brewery in the garage. And then shortly after that, we managed to get some brew slots at a brewery down the road, about 20 miles away, and made some beer on their equipment.
What brewery were you brewing at?
Nowadays it's known as a Staffordshire brewery, very traditional, small brewery. It was interesting working there because it was the first glimpse into commercial brewing.
You are Buxton Brewery, aptly named after the town you're in. Tell me a little bit about the town of Buxton.
It's quite a small town. You can kind of see it in the background. It's down in the. It kind of sits in a bowl, surrounded by hills. It's right in the middle of England, surrounded by big cities. Within about an hour, you can be in Manchester, Sheffield, Derby, Nottingham, Stoke. It is said that something like 40% of the population of the UK lives within an hour of the Peak District, which is the national park that Buxton is in. So it's quite a good place to set up, but itself is a quite small market town, and it's a really old town. It was founded by the local sort of tribes in historic times, but the Romans came. The reason why there was a settlement here was the water, very, very delicious mineral water, which comes out of the ground at quite warm, quite bath temperature. The Romans, they like their spa town, so they settled here. It grew as a settlement and a town, and then it became prominent again in Edwardian, Victorian times, where Victorian fascination for mineral water and spas and treatments and so forth. But it's a nice place because it's a spa town, market town, rather than a industrial mill town like a lot of towns this size in the north of England are, with lots of chimneys and old factories. The architecture in town is very pretty. There's lots of nice buildings and very picturesque with parklands and trees and so forth. So it is a really nice place to live.
The lower part of that town is beautiful, down by the tap room with the crescent and the park and the hotel.
Yeah, and the opera house. It's quite grand for a small town. There's a number of really nice, quite striking buildings and nice architecture. So yeah, it's good. It's just a nice place to sit out with a beer.
I just always thought of Buxton as Buxton, but I never really put it in context with the north, with how so many of those other towns are mill towns, whether it's Huddersfield or, Sheffield, Manchester, they've got all these giant mills, but yeah, you guys just don't have them. I mean, basically, you're surrounded by what's behind you, which is hills or mountains. Now, you coming to this place also plays a little bit into one of your passions, which is, well, climbing and hiking and whatnot.
Yeah, it's pretty much the main reason we moved to this area 18 years ago. Because I like going climbing, mountain biking, just walking in the hills, just being outside in the countryside. But yeah, no, climbing is it's really good around here. It's known as a peak district, but it's not because it's got massively high peaks. It's just very rolling countryside. There are a high number of really, really good climbing crags, limestone and gritstone. They have the gritstone moors, which are quite high and exposed and weathered. And then you have these deep limestone kind of valleys with rivers running through them, which are beautiful in the summertime. It's a very good place to live if you're into outdoors and mountain biking, climbing particularly.
Once the brewery got going, you actually named a lot of the beers after the geological features and the climbing paths.
That's right. As you probably know, thinking up names for beers, especially if you adopt a business model of making many different beers, you can use a random beer name generator website if you want to, but if you want to make a memorable beer name that people are going to remember and latch onto and think, oh yeah, I remember that last time I had it, or whatever, it's really quite hard to think of names. So we decided to use the local, like as you say, geographical features or climbing references, just because some of them are really quite interesting names or not something we'd normally perhaps think of. Some of them work really well and they've been long lasting. Principal amongst which I'd probably say is Axe Edge, because we've been making that for 10 years this year.
I always think of Axe Edge, but then I guess Far Skyline too.
Yeah, in the very far skyline. Black Rocks, High Tor, Moortop, there's been a lot.
Pretty quickly you guys, made a name for yourself. You guys made it onto the Ratebeer's Best Breweries in the World list a few times. Almost every year, actually, since you've been open, right?
Almost. I think it was 11 or 12 we first got listed on it, and I think it has been every year since, yeah.
And you guys have global recognition. You were exporting to the United States, you export to a bunch of different countries, so you're not just a regional brand.
That kind of came part and parcel with that Ratebeer listing, I think. The States is one of the first markets we ever went into outside the UK. But back then we were very conscious that people were finding us through Ratebeer. The phone rang because people were looking to find good breweries and we were high on that list. I think at one point we were exporting exactly half or just over half of what we made into maybe 20, 23 countries, something like that. But in 2020 and continuing now, it's probably 90% UK.
One of the things that always struck me, I don't want to say is odd, but different about you guys, a lot of your colleagues from that earlier generation of craft brewers, the ones who came up in the 2010s as opposed to the 2020 or early 2010s. So like Siren, companies like Magic Rock, they've gotten significantly larger. You guys have the influence, but it seems purposely stayed on the smaller side.
That's a conscious decision. We are very small. Even now, we just closed out 2020 and we were, notwithstanding the fact of the pandemic and its impact on production, but we're still under 5,000 hectolitres annual production. If you produce more than 5,000 hectolitres per year, you start paying high levels of tax on beer, whereas beneath that you get 50% relief on tax on beer. We've never exceeded 5,000 yet. That's largely down to just the way we are. Not really chase numbers in terms of production and turnover. It's always been more about kind of grow to fill our capacity and then bolt something else on and then grow to fill that capacity, rather than saying, right, we need to hit 20,000 hectolitres and what do we need to do that with? We've done it the other way around, so we'll put in some tanks or we'll put in a centrifuge or put in a canning line like we have done. So about every 2 or 3 years we have a big project where we invest quite a decent amount of cash, but it's a measured investment, and we then spend a year or so growing to fill that capacity or whatever it's done to enhance our capability. And that's led us to fine-tuning the business in terms of what we make, beers that are in demand, good for the business, and also we've just grown organically. And it's just a a slightly more relaxing way of doing it, I think, than setting yourself a massive target for volume or, you know, a big number and then having to really beat yourself up trying to hit it. We've followed certainly a less steep growth curve. Having said that, we're now set up, you know, we've got a lot more space, but we've now got another building on site, and we can probably triple our production now with what we've got tank wise and production facilities and what have you.
You mentioned before that pre-2020, you know, about half of your business was exported. That's more or less kind of dried up in the current situation, you know, pandemic. But the other thing that's kind of hanging over that is Brexit. Any clue how that will affect you? Because I know there's still a lot of question marks.
Again, it's like with the morbid fascination, you watch this stuff unraveling in front of you. Yeah, like as you say, we were 50% export, and of that, most of it was to the EU. And there was just nothing, no real guidance or information, or when this happens, you'll need to do this, that and the other, get prepared. It was just a stonewall of blank, non-information. Having said that, we thought, well, we already export to the States, Australia, places like that, and paperwork and procedures are clearly laid out. So the worst case is it'll be like that. Now France is an export rather than an intra-EU movement. So we had all the experience and the systems in place to deal with non-EU customers already, and that's actually how it's panned out.
So, you know, the brewery is kind of on the outskirts of town, but down in the heart of town, in the Victorian center of town, you guys put in a tap room. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Back in 2012-13, there was, you've been to Buxton, you know what it's like. There's many pubs, but very few of them are, I don't want to sound harsh about it, but you know, they're a bit, you don't necessarily want to go there.
Well, a lot of them are boozers, you know, they're old school pubs.
Or owned by the non-brewing pub companies. So they're just pub chains operated by larger corporations with all the generic nationwide brands. You know, you walk in, you could be anywhere. And there's a few little nuggets worth seeking out, but generally the scene was really bad. And it was always in our plan to open a bar, but in 12-13, the situation came to a head and thought, right, we need to do something. And there was a really nice place became available, right in the centre of the lower part of Buxton, just beside the park and the Opera House, and it's the old courthouse building. It's 250 years old, stone-built building, totally gutted the place, ripped it out, and made it into the tap house. We opened in 2013.
Needless to say, it was really successful, and you had to expand.
The tap house became so busy, you couldn't really get in on a Friday, Saturday. If you wanted a table for food and drinks, you just wouldn't get one. The unit next door but one became open, and we managed to connect it through the back of the building. There's the tap house and there's a cellar bar. It's like there's two different frontages, and the cellar bar is more for serious drinking, sitting down and just having some beers, whereas the tap house it's a bit larger, a bit more family oriented, and you can have your lunch or dinner in there as well.
So one of the things that struck me the first time I walked into the tap house is, well, it's not like what I think of when I think of a brewery tap now, at least in the United States, but I mean, this has even become the case in England and in Europe. You know, a lot of them are very modern, industrial feel. You guys did this beautiful melding of, you know, old and new. It does have an old traditional pub feel, but it's not, you know, old-fashioned. It's modern. The food's a little more American-driven than, you know, traditional pub fare. But then you have, you know, all of your beers available, and then you have the beers available on cask. Just the whole vibe of the place makes me think of a pub, you know, in the traditional sense. And then by you saying it's family oriented, you know, that adds to it to me. It's a fantastic place.
You know, on the one hand, we wanted somewhere to go for a drink, because like a place you'd actually like to be in, but also to have a showcase for our own beer, because we didn't have space for a brewery-based tap room. You know, that building, it's only 3 or 4 kilometres away from the brewery, but it's a big difference. You know, up here it's an industrial estate, and that's a really old historic building, beautiful building. Yeah, we developed into the tap house in a sympathetic way, you know, to keep the natural stone. We kind of took the lease out on the building with the long game in mind, because it's right beside the Crescent Hotel, which back then and up until very recently was just a building site with diggers and drills and scaffolding.
You guys had doors out the back, right? Out of the tap room? But they had just been closed up because that was construction?
Literally outside the back of the tap house is a gorgeous sweeping facade of the Crescent building. There's a swimming pool and a spa, and the whole area is now, you can walk through and you can just wander around and go to different cafes and bars. When we moved in there, we thought that would be maybe a year, 2 years down the line. As it happened, it was 8 years down the line. So we lived a long time with the noise and the dust of this project going on the back.
One of the big perks for the tap room was, of course, being down in Lower Buxton. You were also very close to the train station, so people could come in from Manchester and go have a pint or 2 or 12 at the tap room, which is fantastic because the brewery is a few kilometers up the hill and not exactly easily reachable. But that being said, you actually opened up a tasting room inside the brewery.
Yeah, we did. I think that opened in 2017. Yeah, overlooking the malt loft and the brew house. It's kind of made in the vision of the tap house in terms of its natural wood, and had a view over the fields. But it was within the industrial unit where the brewery is, which is just a big, clad shed. And it was really good. It's been used as a staff room at the moment because of COVID. But hopefully when all this is gone now, that will reopen. But the good news is we've got this new building opposite as well, which has, which I'm sat in, and it overlooks the fields, and there's a huge lawn at the side. So come spring and summertime, we're hoping to put tables out there with umbrellas and a barbecue pit or a smokehouse, and kind of try and draw people out of the town centre to actually come up to the brewery. Just make it a bit of a destination, really.
So they keep that pretty well maintained, that field?
We've got quite a large garden as part of the actual, within the boundary of the new building. We've got, but just over the wall, there's a field, and it just runs down towards Buxton. You can see all the buildings in town. There's actually like a Neolithic henge in this field as well, literally about 50 metres that way. And in certain lighting conditions, when the shadows are cast across the ground, you can see like a circle in the ground. And if you look on Google Maps, the brewery building, if you pan over to the field behind you, can actually, it's quite distinct. You can see it in the ground. Quite a significant historical note, and it means this field can never be built on it. So that will always be open fields.
How have I not known about that?
I don't know. Maybe
Time Team is coming back, so maybe you could get a tie-in with a new episode of Time Team.
Oh, that'd be good. Yeah, get a trench dug out there and see what's underneath.
I'll bring my trowel.
But we're thinking we could put on some events in our garden and the field, and a midsummer festival would be good.
That'll be great. And before I forget about it, you've started another alcohol project.
Yeah, Buxton Brewery Distilling, which has actually been a long-term project. 8 years ago, started like a sideline on distilling, but because the brewery was so busy and just took all the time, never really got going. And then maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I thought, well, we either do something with this or can it completely. So we actually started to make some gin, so like dry gin, and now we have a Rosa gin, which is essentially a pink gin with pomegranate and damask, a little bit lower alcohol, just designed to be nice, pleasant gins, not too in your face or trying to overdo themselves, just very few botanicals. We're kind of piggybacking it on the back of the brewery's products, so we're offering it to our customers and through the web shop and so on. But with the new building, we have some space to actually put a permanent home for it.
Do you want to stay in the gin world, or do you want to expand out of that as well?
Very keen to try making some whiskey, but as with putting beer in barrels, putting whiskey into barrels, that's a slow burn project requiring space and time and patience, and we don't have all of those in vast quantities. If we find ourselves the opportunity, we'll get some barrels put to one side and put some whiskey away.
And then you get to barrel age your own beers in those whiskey barrels.
Well, quite, yeah. That would be good, actually. I'd like to do that. It's just a bewildering array, ideas. It's just the same with beer, really. There's so many ideas lying on the cutting room floor, stuff that never happened. Oh, we'll do that, we'll do this, but do the other, and then maybe 10%, if that, actually gets it to the production stage of what we're actually going to invest some time and effort and resources into actually making it happen.
Well, for you guys, I'd see it being not so much a financial, where it's you're so small and you don't have the money to do it. I'd see it as you're so small you don't have the manpower to dedicate to doing it.
Yeah.
It's time that I'm assuming basically either you or Dennis would have to take away from your normal activities to get it going without bringing somebody new in.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit, it's that kind of chicken and egg situation where, okay, we can branch out or develop new product lines or invest in something different we've not done before, but either we have to devote time to it or you give someone a job in order to take it on and drive it forward. At some point, you have to take a punt and say, okay, finally, I'm going to get behind this and make it happen.
Let's transition into, the current landscape and the COVID landscape, I guess. We'll go back to March, which is, I guess, more or less when the UK shut down. What did Buxton Brewery do?
Well, if you go back a couple of months before that to December 19, we had decommissioned the bottling machine in preparation for installing the canning machine, which arrived in December. Around Christmas time, January 1920, we were totally dependent on draft sales, the majority of which was keg. We were installing the canning machine, so the whole building was in turmoil. It was upside down. The expected timescale for the canning line was 2 to 3 weeks of commissioning following installation, and as it turned out, it was more like 3 months. This was getting into late February, and the canning line still wasn't commissioned. And I remember being on the phone to Comac, who supplied the canning machine. And they're in the Bergamo region of Italy, and they said, there's military blockades at the end of the road and no one could come and go. The whole place is getting shut down, and we needed engineers on site to help us commission. So we literally got the canning line installed and commissioned, and before the whole thing just shut down. But literally days before everything shut down, we finally got the canning line going. So we transitioned the brewery from a pretty much 100% dependent on draft sales business, which then had no customers whatsoever because they were all closed, to a pretty much 100% can output business in a matter of weeks. And that's still an ongoing situation because there's no real certainty in the market at the moment. Like, no one knows when the pubs are going to be able to reopen. There's talk and there's rumours, but it's just it's rumours. No one really knows. We're hoping for the best, but planning for the worst.
The tasting room had to close, the tap room had to close, and over last winter, every pub in the country had closed, and now here we are in our second winter of this, and all the pubs are closed again.
Yeah. We couldn't have planned for it, and who would, but I think the lockdown procedures and restrictions on going to the pub have been overly punitive. We did everything. We track and trace and apps and take everyone's name and number, sanitize every table and chair when people came in and went out. We reduced capacity by 60%, table service introduced, went through every hoop to try and keep going. Whereas you go into a supermarket or some other public space where there's no restrictions on coming and going or names taken, it just seems very disproportionate. I think a lot of the restrictions were heavy-handed or one-size-fits-all blanket approach, which is really probably the only thing they can do.
That one-size-fits-all thing would be fine if those same things were placed on other industries, but it seems like your industry has been punished specifically, and this isn't a an Anglo-centric thing. It's the same thing here. It's the same thing, and there are bars and pubs and restaurants that totally flout the rules, but the vast majority of them are actually doing what they're supposed to because, well, they want to be healthy. They want their customers to be healthy, and they want to be open.
One of the annoying things, like in this country, back in, I think it was July, August, there was a huge incentive, They call it eat out to help out, where you'd get a significant discount off your food bill if you went out and ate in a bar or a restaurant for your dinner. And he was actively encouraging people to go out and go to pubs and restaurants. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, it's a complete U-turn, and they switch it back to, no, you cannot go out, you mustn't go out or mingle in these kinds of places because it's a COVID nesting ground. You give them with one hand and they take it away with the other. I mean, for us, our bar operation isn't the main breadwinner for the company. It's a subsidiary activity, hugely important to us, but the mothership, as we call it, is the brewery, and it's making beer, and we can still get it out to people. But I think the way the hospitality industry is being treated, it's harsh. I mean, it's difficult to be critical of the government because it's unprecedented. It's totally, who could have seen this coming, but nevertheless, I think it could have been handled differently and a bit more sympathetically to businesses that actually try and do the right thing.
You guys had to adjust the way you guys operated. You had to let or furlough your staff at the tap room. And I'm assuming you probably cut down production in the brewery, which probably resulted in some folks being furloughed as well. And then slowly people started coming back, but then now you've entered into is it lockdown 2.0? Is it lockdown 3.0? I don't even know at this point.
It's 3.0 now, but it's different to the other two. It doesn't seem to be quite so quiet out. Buxton's a pretty sleepy town, and obviously nowhere's open, but people seem to be out and about a little bit more, even though it's deep winter and it's snow on the ground. We never stopped production of the brewery. It's maintained a pretty level, if not increasing output throughout the situation. But yeah, the tap house and cellar bar have been open, closed, open, closed, open, closed. And the majority of the staff have been on furlough, flexi furlough as well. And then at the brewery, we have to manage people's livelihoods and, they have childcare issues. So we've got a number of staff who alternating like a week on, a week off on flexi furlough, working stroke, managing looking after their kids.
I've talked about the furlough scheme that the government did a few other times, so we don't have to get into that. Did they enter into a new round of that, or have they not done that yet?
Well, furlough, which is like a new thing, it's like an American term, I think. For no one, if you said furlough a year ago, no one would have known what that meant. But it has been a good scheme, I think, and I think it's extended till April, beyond which we don't really know what's going to happen. So again, that's like a level of uncertainty in people's lives, the future. And the other thing is nothing's free. All the furlough and the money, it's got to come from somewhere. What's going to happen to taxes and stuff like that in the future to look forward to.
So you guys basically set up a shop, for lack of a better term, so people could come buy your beer at the brewery. But then you have a web shop, right? That you're doing a lot of your sales through.
The system here is quite, it's straightforward. If you want to sell beer direct to the public, you can do. If you have a license, which is relatively easy to come by. So we have a shop literally outside the warehouse to the brewery. So we have a couple of guys working full time, just packing orders for folk who've ordered either online, and it's like a click and collect service, or they just drive up and come and see what we've got. And then the web shop, it's just grown massively. We're shipping probably more beer now through the website than we ever have.
What's the next step for, Buxton, both in the pandemic, but as a company in general?
Consolidate what we've been doing over the last few months, really, because in the middle of everything, we thought it would be a good idea to change the brewery, to swap the brew house out for a different brewery. So in August, September, we decommissioned the old brew house and put a new one in, which is just a bit more of a modern, it's a semi-automated brewery. So we put a new brewery in, we have the canning line, we've got the new building, and we've got massive potential for using the outside space up at the brewery for events, and there's a beer garden. So we're really just looking to the future, the spring and the summer, getting back to some kind of normality and just welcoming people back up here and, mingling and being a sociable place to come and visit and have a beer. Like, remember that? So that, that's what we're hoping for.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
You play with the cards you're dealt, as we all do, and go through life, personal and business, thinking what's coming around the corner. And I don't think anyone really expected what current year has been. Pretty much everything's been shaped in some way by pandemic. It's just altered everyone's life. But yeah, we are just still here. We're still making beer. We're not planning on going anywhere. That's been a big challenge and also a huge source of satisfaction, to come through something and still be going.
Geoff, thanks for spending all the time with me today. I wish you and the gang up there in Buxton, the best of luck getting through all this, and I can't wait to come visit again.
No problem, yeah, and hope to see you here again soon, and yeah, keep going yourself, and yeah, we'll be through this pretty soon, hopefully.
Thanks, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you'd like to learn more about Buxton Brewery and Distillery, or if you're in the UK and would like to buy some of their goodies, head on over to their website. The link's in the video's description. And if you'd like this video, or any of the other episodes of No Pants, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.